Snow hammered the windows of Willow Creek Diner when a single word shattered the morning silence. "Stop!" Michael Turner, 38, broad-shouldered, steel-blue eyes blazing, stormed through the door as if the winter wind itself was following him. His wife Grace stood trembling, coffee dripping down her coat, humiliation burning in her eyes. And before Michael could take a step, Shadow, their 5-year-old German shepherd, exploded forward with soldier-trained precision, planting himself between Grace and the 3 men towering over her. But the threat inside the diner wasn't the true danger, because through the frosted window, hidden in the drifting snow, Shadow sensed something else. Someone else. Watching, waiting, planning. Michael thought he brought his family to Raven Pines for peace. He had no idea the quiet winter town was already preparing for war. Before the story begins, tell me where you're watching from. Leave a comment, share this video with someone who loves brave dogs, and subscribe for more stories where courage still rises in the cold. May God bless you and your family as we start this journey together. Snow drifted silently across the mountain valley of Raven Pines, settling over rooftops and tall pines like a quiet, watchful veil. Michael Turner stepped out of the truck and inhaled the sharp winter air, feeling its cold bite press against the scars of a life he was still learning to live with. At 38, Michael carried the posture of a man who had spent too many years in search and rescue units, his shoulders broad and squared, his movements economical and precise, his jawline roughened by a few days of stubble that refused to stay tamed. His dark brown hair, cropped short from habit rather than style, collected snowflakes as he overlooked the cabin they had rented for the winter. The building sat at the edge of Raven Pines Forest, dense, ancient, and eerily beautiful. Grace Turner stepped beside him, hugging her coat closer to her. At 31, she had the soft features of someone who had known both tenderness and storms. Her long chestnut hair spilled out of a woolen beanie, loose waves framing a pale face dotted with faint freckles. Grace had always seen the world differently, through color, light, and shadows, and beneath her gentle smile was a quiet resilience shaped by years of wading through Michael's dangerous missions. Her hazel eyes swept the snowy tree line with a mixture of curiosity and unease, as though she sensed something hidden in the silence. Following them out of the truck was Shadow, their 5-year-old German shepherd. His sable coat shimmered in tones of black and gold beneath the fading daylight, and his amber eyes were alert, sharp, and discerning. Shadow moved with disciplined grace, the result of countless hours trained alongside Michael during rescue operations. Yet around Grace, his posture softened. He nudged her leg affectionately, tail brushing her coat like a silent promise to protect her. "This place feels untouched," Grace murmured, her voice drifting like breath over frost. Michael rested a hand on her shoulder. "That's the point. Quiet. We need quiet." But even as he said it, Shadow stiffened. The dog's ears shot forward, his body lowering into a stance Michael recognized too well, the stance of a soldier sensing something unseen. Shadow's gaze pierced the tree line, and a low rumble vibrated from his chest. Michael frowned. "Probably a deer," he said, though doubt stirred like a cold draft under his ribs. Grace placed a gentle hand on Shadow's neck. "He never reacts like this unless it's something else." Michael knew she was right. Shadow was trained to differentiate between wildlife and threats, to read the land and its movements. This reaction was something deeper, instinctive, tense, and sharp-edged. Night settled fast in Raven Pines. After unloading the last box into the cabin, the temperature dropped and a bluish tint stretched across the snow. Michael lit the fireplace while Grace unpacked their art supplies beside the window. The flames cast warm hues across the wooden walls, but Shadow remained posted at the front door, staring through the glass panel into the pitch-dark forest. His body stayed rigid, tail low, a soft growl humming like a warning. Michael approached him. "Shadow," he whispered. "What do you see?" Shadow didn't look back. His breath fogged the glass as though he were trying to sense something far beyond the barrier of the door. Grace's voice carried from behind them. "Michael, maybe this was a mistake. Maybe coming here wasn't the escape we hoped for." Her words weren't fearful. They were observant, thoughtful. Grace always felt the world before she understood it. Michael often admired that, even envied it. But tonight, her sensitivity added weight to the unease simmering in his chest. "We'll be fine," Michael told her. A lie meant to soothe them both. They slept lightly that night. Somewhere around midnight, a distant cracking noise woke Michael. Wood snapping? Footsteps on frozen ground? He wasn't sure. He went to the door quietly, saw Shadow still awake, still watching, still locked onto something he feared Michael wasn't prepared to see. The next morning, a pale sun cast long shadows across the snow. Grace bundled herself in her coat, cheeks flushed pink from the cold, and carried her sketchbook toward the porch. She loved drawing landscapes, especially winter landscapes, where light and silence blended into all kinds of stories. Shadow followed her closely, nose twitching, body low, paws sinking lightly into the untouched snow. Michael stayed near the cabin, clearing a path and listening for any unusual sound. His instincts were hardly ever wrong, and last night's unease hadn't left him. It merely settled deeper. Grace found a spot near a fallen log and began sketching the pines dusted with fresh snow. As she shaded a corner of the forest floor, something caught her eye, a glint beneath the thin crust of ice, metallic, sharp, out of place. She leaned closer. "Michael," she called softly, "something's here." But Shadow reached her first. The dog rushed forward, barking once, a deep, commanding bark that echoed off the trees. His body blocked her sketchbook as he stood rigid above the shimmering patch beneath the ice. His growl was darker this time, reverberating with instinctive warning. Grace's breath stilled. Michael arrived moments later, eyes narrowing at the sight. The metallic shape beneath the ice flickered again, like buried machinery or something recently dropped, or hidden. Michael felt a coldness that had nothing to do with winter. Shadow's hackles stood straight, his growl crawling into a deeper register, and in that moment, Michael understood. This winter in Raven Pines would not be peaceful. Whatever waited beneath the snow had been waiting for them. Morning light slid across Raven Pines like pale gold brushed over a frozen canvas, and Grace Turner walked down the snow-packed road toward Willow Creek Diner, hoping a warm breakfast might calm the lingering unease from the night before. She pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, breath blooming in the cold air. The quiet of the town felt too still, as if listening. Shadow trotted beside her, his sable fur dusted with frost, ears flicking at every distant crack of ice. He had not relaxed once since dawn, and that alone tightened the knot in Grace's stomach. Willow Creek Diner appeared ahead, a small wooden building painted faded teal, its windows fogged by warmth inside. The bell above the door jingled as Grace entered, releasing a rush of heat and the smell of buttered pancakes. A few locals sat scattered across the room, an elderly couple sharing a muffin, a bearded man in a flannel jacket sipping coffee quietly, a teen server wiping down tables. Ordinary people, ordinary winter morning. It should have felt safe. Grace stepped toward the counter where Chloe Abbott, the young waitress, smiled warmly. Chloe was in her early 20s, petite, with curly dark brown hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Her skin was olive-toned, and her hazel eyes quick and observant, the kind that had learned to read trouble long before others sensed it. Growing up with two younger brothers had carved a toughness beneath her cheerful exterior. "Cold morning, huh?" Chloe asked. "What can I get you?" Grace returned a small smile. "Just a box of pastries, please." Shadow lay at her feet, rigid but silent. The door opened again. 3 men walked in, and the warmth of the diner seemed to shrink. Grace noticed them immediately, not because they looked threatening at first glance, but because Shadow did. He rose instantly, muscles taut, head low. A deep note rumbled from his chest. The first man, Derek Cole, removed his gloves with slow, deliberate motions. He was in his mid-40s, tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick black beard streaked faintly with gray. His nose was slightly crooked, as if broken long ago, and left to heal improperly. Derek's cold blue eyes roamed the diner with a confidence too casual to be harmless. Grace recognized the type, someone who learned early in life that size and intimidation could buy obedience. Beside him walked Mason Hart, shorter but stockier, with a shaved head that reflected the diner's light. His jaw was square, thickly built, and his tense movements hinted at old anger that never fully settled. The deep line between his brows made him look constantly irritated or constantly ready for a fight. Trailing them was Eli Ward, the youngest, late 20s, with sandy blonde hair that stuck out from beneath a frayed beanie. His face was narrow, cheekbones sharp, and his restlessness betrayed a nervous energy. His eyes flicked around the room, taking stock of everyone in a way that made Grace's skin prickle. Something about him felt volatile, like a match too close to a fuse. Chloe stiffened when she saw them. Her smile dropped. Grace noticed. Derek's gaze finally landed on her. A slow, unpleasant grin formed. "Fresh face," he muttered. "Didn't know this diner was hiring models." Grace swallowed, forcing herself not to react, but her fingers tightened slightly around her purse strap. She hated confrontation, hated attention even more. But what truly frightened her wasn't Derek's words. It was Shadow's posture. The dog had shifted closer to her leg, hackles raised in a dark ridge down his spine, a silent warning she had learned to trust. Mason snorted. "Oh, relax, Derek. She's just buying breakfast." But Eli stepped around the counter suddenly, startling both Chloe and Grace. He grabbed a pot of freshly brewed coffee, hot steam rising from the spout. "Let's welcome her properly," he said with a grin too wide to be friendly. Before Grace could step back, Eli tipped the pot forward and splashed steaming liquid across her coat. Grace gasped, the hot shock burning through the fabric. Shadow barked, loud, sharp, furious. The sound cut the diner's air like a blade. Chloe shouted, "Hey, that's enough!" But no one else moved. The elderly couple shrank back in fear. The bearded man lowered his gaze. Everyone in the diner folded into silence, as though intimidation had become the language of the morning. Grace's breath trembled. Embarrassment, pain, and confusion tangled inside her chest. Why me? Why now? Why these men? Before she could think further, the diner door slammed open again. Michael Turner stood in the doorway, snow clinging to his hair and shoulders. At 38, he carried the physical presence of a man who had run into burning buildings and walked out alive. Muscular build, stern jawline, and steel blue eyes that saw everything in an instant. His gaze fell on Grace's soaked coat. Something broke inside him. Shadow barked once, stepping directly between Michael and the men, as if telling him, "Not yet. Something is wrong. Someone is watching." Michael froze, breathing hard. Old instincts surged toward violence, toward protection, but Shadow blocked him, tail low, ears turned not toward the men, but toward the window. Someone was outside, watching. Michael sensed it too, a prickling along his spine, a feeling he trusted more than logic. "Grace, he said quietly, "we're leaving." On the walk home, the cold bit sharply at their faces. Grace walked close to Michael, trying to steady her breathing. Shadow glanced behind them every few seconds. Back at the cabin, Michael circled the perimeter. His boots stopped beside something half buried in snow, a large footprint, deeper than his own. Near it, a small shard of black industrial plastic lodged beneath the window frame. Someone had stood there, watching, listening, waiting. Winter in Raven Pines had just shifted from unsettling to dangerous. 10. The afternoon light in Raven Pines had a muted, glassy quality, the kind that made the world feel both softened and sharpened at the same time. Snow clung to every branch in crystalline layers, muffling sound, thickening silence. Grace Turner stood near the cabin porch, breathing slowly, trying to calm the restlessness that had been building inside her ever since the incident at the diner. Fear had crept beneath her skin like cold seeping through thin gloves. She hated that, hated feeling trapped in her own mind, in her own home. "I need to walk," she whispered, mostly to herself. "If I stay in here, I'll start imagining ghosts." Michael Turner studied her carefully. At 38, he had learned to read emotions before words. Years in search and rescue had conditioned him to see tension in shoulders, tremor in breath, tightness in jawlines. Grace's movements carried all three. He nodded gently. "I'm coming with you." Shadow pushed his head between them, tail low but steady, amber eyes locked on Grace as if he felt every shift in her heartbeat. At 5 years old, his body was strong and athletic, but his demeanor was older, weathered by instinct, experience, and the shadows he seemed to sense in the forest. Snow dusted across his black and gold fur as he stepped forward, nose twitching. He took point the moment they entered the trail, moving ahead with deliberate caution. Grace tried to focus on the beauty. The birches painted silver, the long icicles hanging from branches like glass daggers, the hush of winter. But her mind kept replaying the scalding splash of coffee, the mocking laughter, the way Eli's eyes had lingered on her as if she were prey. Now every rustle in the woods felt threatening. Michael sensed it. "We'll just take a short circle," he murmured. "Shadow will warn us if anything's wrong." She nodded, though the reassurance didn't fully reach her chest. The three followed a narrow slope where the snow thinned beneath the trees. Grace inhaled deeply, letting the icy air burn her lungs, reminding her she was alive, that she wasn't going to let fear own her. But halfway down the trail, Shadow halted. His body stiffened. His tail froze mid-movement. His ears pinned sharply forward. Grace immediately felt the old panic rise. "Michael?" Michael raised a hand in warning. "Stay behind me." A second later, the forest erupted. Two figures burst from behind a thick pine, snow exploding around their boots. Derek Cole lunged first, his massive frame cutting through the cold air with terrifying speed. His thick black beard was coated with frost. His cold blue eyes burned with something harsher than anger. Derek was the kind of man shaped by decades of using force to get his way. His presence alone could intimidate a crowd. Today, it aimed at Grace. Behind him came Mason Hart, stocky and powerful, his shaved head gleaming like polished stone. His heavy breathing and hardened jawline revealed a mind ruled more by impulse than strategy. A man who acted first and thought later. A dangerous flaw today. Grace barely had time to scream before Derek grabbed her arm. His grip was iron tight, fingers digging painfully through her coat. Panic surged through her chest, choking her breath. "Michael!" Michael charged forward, instincts snapping into combat mode. All noise dulled except the thundering of his own heartbeat. Derek tried to drag Grace backward, but Shadow collided with him first. The German Shepherd launched with explosive precision, jaws locking onto Derek's forearm with a deep, primal growl. Derek roared, stumbling, releasing Grace. Mason barreled toward them like a bull, and Michael met him head-on. The two crashed into the snow, rolling in a flurry of fists and frozen air. Mason swung wildly, his face twisted with rage. Michael countered, striking with controlled, brutal efficiency, years of training honed into each movement. But Mason was thick, heavy, and fueled by something unhinged. Grace crawled away on her hands, breath shaking. She watched Shadow hold Derek down, teeth clamped, refusing to release even as Derek reached for a fallen branch. Grace's stomach knotted. Shadow was unbelievable, fearless, but Derek was far stronger than she had imagined. Then it happened too fast. Derek yanked the branch up and smashed it across Shadow's ribs. The crack of impact echoed horribly through the trees. Grace's scream ripped from her throat. Shadow yelped but didn't let go. His loyalty stronger than pain, stronger than instinct. He clamped down again, buying seconds Michael desperately needed. Michael overpowered Mason with a final surge, shoving him face down into the snow. Mason, wide-eyed and panicked, scrambled backward. Derek, breathing heavily, pulled free when Shadow finally stumbled aside from the blow. "We're not dying for this," Derek barked. He grabbed Mason by the jacket, and the two fled into the trees, their heavy steps shattering the fragile silence of the woods. Grace rushed to Shadow, falling to her knees. "Shadow, Shadow, baby, look at me!" Her voice shook violently. The dog whimpered, breathing fast, sides heaving. Michael knelt beside them, hands trembling with adrenaline, fury, and fear. "They tried to take you," he whispered to Grace. "They weren't just trying to scare us. They were trying to take you." Shadow pushed his head weakly into Grace's palm. Michael stood, scanning the area. Something glinted beneath the snow. He dug through the icy layer with gloved hands and uncovered metal scraps, tire tracks from an ATV, and, most disturbing, a narrow fissure in the ground, like an entrance or exit to something buried beneath raven pines. A voice called from behind them. Standing near the trail was a woman in her mid-50s, wrapped in a burgundy winter coat. Helen Brooks, a town councilwoman, had sharp gray eyes and an air of practiced composure etched into her mature face. Her silver-streaked hair was tied back neatly, and her posture held the weight of someone who had carried too many town secrets for too long. "You two need help," she said, voice low but calm. "And answers." Michael faced her, guarded. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been watching the wrong people dig in our forests." She glanced at the metal fragments in his hand. "Raven Pines is being mined illegally, and your wife—" Her gaze shifted to Grace. She unknowingly drew the exact location of the hidden site. Grace felt the cold settle deeper than snow. The sky over Raven Pines dimmed into a cold, metallic gray as afternoon descended, the kind of light that made the snow shimmer like fragments of glass. Michael Turner walked beside Helen Brooks, his boots sinking into the crusted white as he tried to make sense of the morning's chaos. His breath fogged sharply in front of him, carrying hints of frustration and fear. The attack in the woods still replayed in his mind in flashes, each memory sharpened by the image of Shadow collapsing after the blow and Grace's trembling voice calling his name. Helen Brooks moved with firm, steady footsteps, surprisingly quick for a woman in her mid-50s. Her burgundy coat stood out against the pale world, and the silver in her neatly tied hair reflected the cold light like frosted threads. Her sharp gray eyes carried a mixture of exhaustion and purpose, as though years of fighting small-town corruption had carved both strength and sorrow into her features. She had seen too much, Michael thought. Too many secrets pushed into the shadows. Too many warnings ignored. Inside the abandoned maintenance shed where she led him, a man stood waiting. He turned as they entered. Agent Kyle Dawson was in his early 40s, tall and lean, with a face shaped by discipline, angular jawline, trimmed dark beard, and piercing green eyes that missed nothing. His hair was dark brown and cut close to the scalp, more out of practicality than style. He wore a weathered black windbreaker with the federal insignia tucked discreetly beneath the collar. Kyle carried the air of a man who had spent years chasing criminals through forests, deserts, and forgotten corners of America, collecting scars, both seen and unseen. There was a faint tenseness in his shoulders, a man who expected danger long before it appeared. Helen introduced them. Kyle, this is Michael Turner, former search and rescue. He and his wife have been directly targeted. Kyle's handshake was firm, professional. I've heard bits already: illegal extraction, violent intimidation, attempted kidnapping. His voice was low, even, but Michael sensed the simmer of anger behind it, the kind of anger born from seeing ordinary people hurt by greed. You're lucky your dog fought them off. Shadow, still bruised but alert, stood at Michael's side. His amber eyes remained sharp, despite pain lurking beneath the surface. Kyle crouched slightly to observe him. Soldier's posture, he murmured. Smart, loyal. He'll lead us if he can. Shadow's ears twitched at the sound of Grace's footsteps approaching. Grace Turner entered the shed bundled in her coat, her long chestnut hair tied loosely behind her, though strands had escaped to frame her anxious face. Fear still lingered in her hazel eyes, but beneath it was resilience, a quiet, determined strength. She had always felt danger before understanding it, and today that instinct felt terrifyingly accurate. Kyle studied her gently. You drew something that complicates everything. Grace swallowed. I didn't know. I didn't mean... You didn't do anything wrong, Kyle said. But now we need to see what you saw. Shadow nudged Grace's leg, then began walking toward the back of the shed, nose low to the ground. The group followed as Shadow traced a path down a narrow trail behind the hill, his movements tense but purposeful. The deeper they traveled, the colder the air seemed to grow. The noise of the town faded until only crunching snow and distant wind remained. Finally, Shadow stopped at a clearing where sunlight reflected sharply off the ice. Grace gasped softly. That's it. That's where I saw the shimmer when I was drawing. Michael knelt and scraped away the snow with his gloved hands. Beneath, a jagged crack split the frozen ground, narrow but long, like a concealed fissure. Kyle crouched beside him and swept a flashlight across the opening. The beam revealed a hollow chamber beneath the surface, partially concealed by sheets of ice. Metallic reflections glimmered in the cold darkness. Kyle muttered, "There's a structure here, and machinery." With great care, Michael widened the opening just enough to slip inside. A cold draft rose from below, carrying the faint smell of oil and heated metal. He lowered himself down, landing on solid ground. Helen and Grace followed, and Kyle descended last. They found themselves inside an underground chamber carved into the earth. Piles of industrial drilling equipment lined the walls. Massive augers, portable generators, coils of cables, and crates marked with coded symbols. The ground beneath was dusted with shimmering mineral fragments, silver-blue flecks that caught the flashlight beams like stars scattered on the stone. Grace whispered, awe and dread mixing in her voice. Someone's been mining down here. Not someone, Kyle corrected. A well-funded operation. This is big. Michael moved toward a set of large metal canisters when a faint vibration trembled through the ground. Shadow's ears snapped upright. Then, the roar of an engine shattered the quiet. Grace froze. "They're coming!" Up above, the sound grew louder, tires skidding, doors slamming, voices shouting. Kyle rushed toward the ladder, gun drawn. Michael followed him, adrenaline flooding through him like fire. Derek's voice echoed down the fissure. "Get the woman! She's seen it!" Eli Ward appeared at the top of the opening, his narrow face twisted with cold determination. The young man looked more dangerous than before, his sandy hair blown wild by the wind, eyes sharp with intent. Behind him stood Mason, jaw clenched, holding a metal pipe. Before they could descend, a blur of black and gold shot out from the shadows. Shadow launched himself at Eli with every ounce of strength left in his battered body. His snarl thundered against the chamber walls. Eli stumbled backward, nearly falling into the snow above. "Move!" Michael shouted. Chaos erupted. Kyle and Helen pushed Grace toward the side passage that Shadow had indicated earlier. Michael fought Mason near the opening, striking with desperate precision. Kyle kicked the generator, sending sparks across the floor to distract Derek long enough for the group to flee. Outside, townspeople, drawn by the engine noise and Shadow's earlier barking, rushed toward the forest edge. Their shouts cracked through the air. Eli cursed and stumbled back. "We'll take her another day. Fall back!" Derek, Mason, and the men scrambled into their vehicles as the townspeople advanced. Engines roared. Snow erupted beneath spinning tires. And then, they were gone. Grace collapsed into Michael's arms, Shadow limping to her side. The townspeople surrounded them, Helen leaning heavily against a tree. The hidden mine was real. The threat was real. And now, the whole town knew. Night fell heavily over Raven Pines, smothering the valley in layers of deep blue shadow as federal agents set up their temporary command post in the old ranger station. The glow of portable lights flickered against the snow, casting long silhouettes of officers moving with urgent precision. The atmosphere was tense, electric, like the forest itself was holding its breath. Michael Turner stood at the edge of the lot, arms folded tightly across his chest, staring into the swirling snow as if he could force answers out of the night. Behind his stern eyes lay a storm of dread. Grace was inside the cabin, with townspeople guarding her, but the memory of Eli lunging toward her earlier burned sharply in Michael's mind. He could feel old instincts rising again, fear sharpened into protectiveness drifting dangerously close to rage. Shadow lay at his feet, ribs bandaged beneath his thick sable fur. The dog breathed slowly, carefully, but his amber eyes remained fiercely alert. Every few seconds, he would glance into the darkness, ears twitching at sounds that Michael couldn't hear. Pain flickered through his body each time he shifted, yet the dog's posture never dropped below readiness. Shadow had always been loyal, but tonight he radiated something more, determination carved from instinct, as if some invisible thread pulled him toward the heart of danger. Agent Kyle Dawson approached, his lean frame wrapped in a heavy tactical jacket. Snow settled into the dark stubble along his jaw and the rough creases on his forehead. His green eyes held a look Michael recognized, the exhaustion of a man who had been fighting the same enemy too long. "We received a trail cam ping," Kyle said, voice low. "A vehicle speeding west, ATV tires. It matches Eli Ward's escape pattern." The name twisted something in Michael's chest. Eli Ward, young, reckless, dangerous, had proven he would do anything to silence them. The thought of Grace's terrified voice as he reached for her earlier made Michael's pulse throb at his temples. Where was he heading? Kyle pointed toward the ridge looming beyond the tree line, its peaks swallowed by the storm. Silver Ridge. Narrow paths. Unstable cliffs. If he hides there, we might lose him. Shadow suddenly rose. Pain shuddered through his body, but he did not falter. He took one step forward, nose lifted toward the wind. Michael watched him, watched the way the dog's eyes sharpened, pupils narrowing with certainty. Shadow had found something. "He knows," Michael whispered. "He can scent Eli." Kyle exhaled. "Then we follow him." The storm thickened as they crossed into the forest, icy winds slicing across their faces. Snow clawed at their boots, bearing tracks almost as fast as they formed. Shadow pushed forward, limping at times but refusing to slow. His breath came out in white bursts, his ears pinned against the wind. Each step he took echoed with purpose. Michael kept a few feet behind him, torn between awe and fear. "Shadow, easy boy," he murmured, but the dog would not ease. Not tonight, not while Grace was still in danger. Kyle slowed beside Michael. "That dog isn't just tracking," he said. "He's protecting someone he loves." Michael swallowed hard. He wasn't sure whether the tightness in his chest came from the cold or the truth in Kyle's words. They reached a steep incline where the wind screeched between jutting rocks. Shadow stopped, nostrils flaring. Ahead, faint engine echoes trembled through the storm. Eli roared. The ATV tires spun wildly as he attempted to navigate the ridge. Michael and Kyle scrambled upward, grabbing branches, boots slipping on frozen stone. When they reached the clearing, they saw Eli's tall, narrow frame hunched over the ATV handles, his sandy blonde hair plastered to his forehead by sleet. His sharp, feverish eyes flicked toward Michael with equal parts hatred and panic. "You should have stayed out of it," Eli shouted, voice ragged. "She saw too much." The words hit Michael like a blade. Before he could respond, Eli jerked the ATV forward, straight toward the figure emerging from the tree line. Grace. She had followed them, breathless, terrified, her coat whipping in the storm as she tried desperately to reach Michael. "Michael!" she cried. Eli saw her and accelerated. Michael lunged forward, heart stopping. "Grace!" But Shadow moved first. The German shepherd launched himself with a roar of pure instinct, colliding hard with Michael to knock him out of the ATV's path. Snow exploded beneath them. Shadow hit the side of the ATV with full force, body slamming into the machine. Eli screamed as he lost control. The ATV skidded violently, wheels spinning, before flipping onto its side and sliding into a bank of ice. Kyle sprinted toward the wreck, weapon drawn, while Michael stumbled to his feet, chest heaving. "Shadow!" he choked, running to the dog's side. Shadow lay in the snow, panting sharply, sides trembling, but alive. His amber eyes lifted weakly toward Grace, who had fallen to her knees beside him, tears mixing with the snow on her cheeks. "It's over," Kyle called, pulling Eli into cuffs. "The operation is finished. They're all done." And just like that, the storm inside Raven Pines began to ease. In the days that followed, federal teams dismantled the illegal mining operation. Arrests swept through nearby towns. Raven Pines slowly untensed, breathing again after months of fear held tight beneath winter. Shadow received treatment, bandages, and rest, though the town insisted on calling him what he had earned, the winter hero. Grace completed her winter painting at last. Gone were the dark tree lines and hidden threats. Instead, warm golden light poured from their cabin window, spilling softly across the snow. And on the porch, curled protectively at the edge of the light, she painted Shadow, watching the forest, forever guarding the ones he loved. In every winter of our lives, there are moments when darkness feels heavier than we can carry, moments when fear blinds us, when danger approaches without warning, when the storms outside mirror the storms inside our hearts. Yet somehow, in the coldest hours, a light always appears. Sometimes that light arrives through the courage of a soldier, sometimes through the loyalty of a faithful dog, and sometimes it comes softly, like a whisper from God, reminding us that miracles still walk beside us. Shadow wasn't just protecting Grace and Michael. He was a reminder that even in the harshest winters, God places guardians in our path, quiet miracles, everyday blessings, small signs that we are never left to fight alone. Maybe in your own life, you've faced moments like this, moments when you felt unseen, overwhelmed, or afraid. But just like the first warm light shining across the snow at Raven Pines, hope often appears exactly when we need it most. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need a reminder of God's gentle protection. Leave a comment and tell us which moment moved you. And if you believe in faith, healing, and the unseen miracles that guide our steps, hit like, subscribe, and join this growing family. May God bless you and your loved ones. May He guard your steps, calm your storms, and remind you that His love is steady, quiet, and everlasting.